Parubiy's killer has been detained. A photo has been published. He has already given his first testimony. Putin was afraid to approach Xi Jinping. The dictator was led by the hand. The first one is gone. The Flamingo missile destroyed an enemy outpost and 6 boats in occupied Crimea. Exclusive video. And in the Kherson region, the occupiers killed 20 of their own with friendly fire. Trump has come back and wants to meet with Zelensky in Paris on September 4th. The Ukrainian mafia will take over Hungary. Because of this, Budapest will block Kyiv's accession to the EU. And a bouquet for 15,000 hryvnias for school. The new school year has started in the country. And I'll tell you all the details later in this episode. My name is Katerina Kolhan. Let's start this informational Monday together. The suspect in the murder of Andriy Parubiy was detained in Khmelnytsky region. He has already given his first testimony. According to the Minister of Internal Affairs, Ihor Klimenko, they found the direct trail of the shooter 24 hours after the murder and detained him 36 hours later. The perpetrator studied the victim's movements, knew where and when Parubiy was going, mapped out routes, and even planned an escape path. According to a family friend, Andriy Parubiy was heading to the gym, planning for an ordinary day. In recent days, he had been living in Lviv and taking care of his family's health. Prosecutor General Ruslan Kravchenko reported that the suspect has already given his initial testimony. More details will be provided later by the police. The new cruise missile Flamingo is already actively destroying Russian positions. Militarny reports the first confirmed strike on an FSB outpost and 6 patrol boats at once in occupied Crimea. This operation became part of a combined attack on Crimea. Among the destroyed targets are not only naval assets but also Mi-8 helicopters and a Mi-24 attack helicopter right at the Simferopol airport. Military sources claim that these missiles are already being actively launched at targets on Russian territory. There is even video footage of the actual launch. Our intelligence operatives are also working to demilitarize Crimea. The ghosts of the main intelligence directorate destroyed 5 key elements of the enemy's air defense system. These include the Utoste radar complex for detection and targeting, the RT-70 radio telescope, the GLONASS satellite radio navigation system complex housed in a dome, and the MIS-M1 onboard radar station for maritime monitoring. Meanwhile, Volodymyr Zelensky has announced new strikes deep inside Russia. According to the president, everything is ready for a series of strikes. Forces and resources have already been prepared and new deep strikes have been planned, he said after the briefing. And while Russian territory is being attacked by friendly drones, last night UAVs struck key facilities in Krasnodar Krai and Tatarstan, including one of the main targets that has repeatedly been hit by Ukrainian drones, the Krasnodar oil refinery. According to the regional operations headquarters, drone debris damaged a technological installation. The fire covered an area of about 300 square meters. And in Kropotkin, after a UAV attack, an electrical substation near the railway caught fire. Local residents are complaining about power outages. Previously, this facility supplied power to the regional energy system and key railway junctions. Meanwhile, in Tatarstan, the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations warned about a drone attack on Yelabuga, where a Shahed drone manufacturing plant is located. Local residents are complaining about explosions and Rosaviatsia has closed the airports in Kazan and Nizhnekamsk. Infighting among the occupiers on the left bank of the Kherson region and even friendly fire within the Russian army. The Atesh partisans report that enemy units engaged in a real fratricidal shootout, leaving behind 21 killed in action and 17 wounded. The conflict broke out between the 127th Reconnaissance Brigade and the 24th Motorized Rifle Regiment of the Russians. It all started when the motorized riflemen from the 24th Regiment opened fire on the positions of their own reconnaissance troops. They decided it was a Ukrainian sabotage and assault group. In a panic, the 127th Brigade returned fire and chaotic shooting broke out. As a result, 21 Russian soldiers went to Kobzon's concert. Another 17 were wounded. According to the Atesh partisans, the incident happened due to complete chaos in coordination between units. The soldiers were frightened, poorly trained, and the command seemed to have completely lost control. In the next few days, the Russians may launch a serious offensive. This was written on social media by volunteer and activist Maria Berlinska. She also writes that the front needs maximum support right now, especially in the Donetsk direction. Berlinska also calls for an information war. She suggests posting about what is happening on social media and communicating with Western journalists to share human stories, showing through concrete examples what the war has done and what Russian terror really is. We will tell you more about what is happening right now on the front lines and around them in our report.
The Russian army has been encircled in the Donetsk region. The Ukrainian armed forces continue to regain control over new settlements, while Russian generals have been caught lying. Experts have analyzed the maps with which the Russian General Staff reported on the successes of the summer offensive. We have gathered the latest news for you. What is happening on the front today? Announcer, Dobropilya in the Donetsk region, a location that just a week ago was a cause for concern for our command. Today, this section of the front is one the Ukrainian armed forces can be proud of. The salient that Russia broke through in our defensive line has been cut off, the military reports, and the entire group of occupiers is now encircled. The destruction of the enemy is now only a matter of time. Realizing this, Russian soldiers often surrender on their own.
Oh, so that's really it then? Just 1 against 3 opponents. Because that's right, the 93rd is at work.
Narrator. However, Donetsk region itself remains the section of the front where Russia is trying to break through most forcefully. 2/3 of all enemy losses are concentrated right here. For many long months, the objective has remained unchanged, to take Pokrovsk at any cost. The armed forces of Ukraine are holding back the offensive with titanic effort.
Malakayev Serhiy Volodymyrovich, whether the Russians are able to encircle or capture the Pokrovsk defensive stronghold will determine the advance toward Kostiantynivka, Druzhkivka, Kramatorsk and the Kramatorsk defensive area. And the fact that after the Russian breakthrough to the northeast of Dobropilya, they essentially abandoned to their fate those units that ended up surrounded by our defense forces, well, it shows that they simply don't care about their own people.
Announcer. In addition to the direction of Dobropilya, the armed forces of Ukraine have also had successes near Kupiansk-Donetsk region. There, the spokesman for the Dnipro group of troops reported on the liberation of the village of Mern, from where the Russians were completely expelled and where a cleanup had been carried out the day before.
Anatoly Kurov, Kupiansk. Indeed, a lot of work is being done to liberate some of our locations. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, but I think that with our counterattacks, we'll be able to change the situation for the better. At the very least, the enemy has not been able to move heavy equipment across the Oskil River. This is something the enemy has been trying to do for probably a year, more than a year, in order to create suitable bridgeheads. And of course, work is also being done against sabotage and reconnaissance groups.
Announcer. Recently, the Zaporizhzhia direction has also become more active, according to our military. The Russians no longer have enough forces to launch an assault there without losing effectiveness elsewhere. As a solution, they redeployed forces that had been fighting in Sumy region and the Kursk region closer to the sea.
Anatoly Kurov, this is a Marine infantry strike force. But after bringing fresh Marine infantry and paratrooper forces into Sumy and Kursk regions, once they've been worn down in battles there, they are then redeployed to the Zaporizhzhia direction. Yes, these are indeed the most thoroughly prepared forces for significant offensive operations, but to a very large extent, these particular units and formations are already quite depleted and exhausted.
Announcer. The result of such a regrouping did not take long to show. For several weeks now, the defense forces have continued to advance in the Sumy region. This trend continues today.
Anatoly Kurov. In Sumy region, we not only managed to prevent the enemy from creating a so-called buffer zone, but also stopped them from approaching Sumy, which would have allowed them to shell the city with various types of tube artillery. Moreover, there are liberated settlements, and there are areas where the enemy was actually pushed back onto the territory of the Russian Federation. We have such locations there today.
Announcer. Meanwhile, Russian generals have been caught in yet another lie. They've certainly learned how to paint a pretty picture over there behind the fence, but those images don't reflect reality. In particular, this deception was noticed during a briefing by the chief of the Russian General Staff, Gerasimov. According to the map, Russia was shown as controlling the entire gray zone where their soldiers had ever set foot. OSINT analysts compared it with the deep state map and confirmed it was a forgery. Moreover, it seems the map hasn't been updated for a long time, since not only gray zones but also territories already returned to Ukrainian control are still marked as Russian. However, the embarrassment didn't end there.
Vyacheslav Vladimirovich. The group of forces that was deployed continues its relentless offensive along almost the entire front line. And since March, more than 3,500 square kilometers of territory and 149 settlements have been liberated.
Narrator: so what could possibly be wrong with Gerasimov's triumphant speeches? Clarity was provided by journalists who calculated how many settlements there actually are in the regions claimed by the Russian Federation.
Dmitro-Butsko, now just compare 149 to 8,640. All right, let's even subtract from this the settlements that are already under the control of the Russian Federation's army. Still, we're talking not about just 1 or even 2 or 3 or even 4,000 settlements, but a truly significant number of settlements that are spread across a vast area. In half a year, 149 settlements have come under the control of the Russian Federation's army.
Narrator: in summary, all Western and Ukrainian analysts agree on one thing. The Russian elite offensive did not simply fail, but considering the ratio of losses and results for the Russian Federation, it became the most catastrophic military operation for Putin's army in history.
Anna Prokopchuk. In Jiangxin, China, at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, Xi Jinping rolled out the red carpet for leaders of about 20 countries around the world. Putin also arrived in China for a 4-day visit. He was not greeted with ceremonial honors, as for example the head of Azerbaijan was, but simply by military personnel at one of the bases. Overall, the meeting appears to be a collective resistance to Western pressure.
However, the following footage clearly shows who is who at the meeting, as Putin simply does not dare to approach Xi Jinping on his own. He was literally led by the hand to the Chinese leader by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And after the meeting, Modi posted a photo of himself hugging the dictator, captioning it that it is always a pleasure to meet with President Putin.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
It is known that Putin is staying in China for the military parade on September 3rd, marking the 80th anniversary of the victory over Japan. Kim Jong-un is also expected to attend. Meanwhile, the dictator once again wasted no time in spouting another batch of nonsense in an attempt to justify the aggression against Ukraine, claiming that the crisis in Ukraine did not arise as a result of Russia's invasion but because of a coup in Kyiv provoked by the West. According to him, the West provoked the events of 2014, and the attempt to draw Ukraine into NATO is a direct threat to Moscow. He also praised the efforts of China and India in peaceful settlement and promised to discuss the details with his colleagues, even referring to a meeting with Trump in Alaska, saying that understandings were reached there that opened the way to peace. The war could end as soon as tomorrow if Ukraine surrenders, but then the day after tomorrow, Putin will attack us. So that's not an option. This is a quote from German Chancellor Friedrich Merz on the Clash portal. At the same time, the official stated that the fighting in Ukraine could continue for quite a long time, and the issue of deploying German peacekeeping troops is not currently on the agenda. Meanwhile, in his evening address, Volodymyr Zelensky noted that it has already been 2 weeks since Trump gave Russia time to prepare for negotiations. The president stated that Ukraine is counting on a strong position from the US, Europe, and the G20 countries regarding Russia's attempts to prolong the war. A summit of European leaders will be held in Paris on September 4th. The Financial Times reports that those who met with Trump in Washington will gather in the French capital to continue high-level discussions. They will discuss security guarantees for Ukraine. It is quite likely that Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump will meet at this summit. However, for now, these names are not present in the official protocols. As for Donald Trump himself, he has already been declared dead on social media. One of the arguments put forward by supporters of this theory is J.D. Vance's statement about being ready to take the helm of the United States in the event of the worst-case scenario. Another sign, they say, is the sharp increase by dozens of times in visits to pizzerias near the White House. At the same time, Trump himself, amid rumors about his death, wrote on his social network that he has never felt better in his life. So what actually happened? What is in the end the condition of the American president? All of this will be covered in the following report.
Trump is dead. Rumors about the possible death of Donald Trump began to spread on Twitter, Telegram, and other online platforms as he has not appeared in front of TV cameras or on live broadcasts for several days in a row.
Let's try to put an end to all of this.
Recently, the American press has been talking a lot about how things are not going well for Trump. The reason for all this is the swelling in the president's legs noticed by the press, as well as large bruises on his arms. Trump has even started wearing compression stockings and applying foundation to his hands to conceal his condition.
I can see that he forgets what he's saying, and it's starting to resemble Joe Biden's manner in recent years.
It was precisely the poor physical and mental health of the 46th president, Joe Biden, that became Trump's main criticism of the Democrats. Now, however, Donald himself doesn't look any better.
Donald Trump has problems with concentration. In addition, we are observing a number of cognitive impairments in the American president.
No matter how much the White House administration tries to convince journalists that the bruises on the president's hands are the result of constant and lengthy handshakes at meetings, the American press has already dubbed them Trump's black marks. On overseas television, radio, and podcasts, doctors and experts of all kinds are trying to analyze what is happening to Trump based on visible symptoms and are counting the days until his death.
Even members of his close inner circle do not know how he actually feels. But the real problem here is that not only do they not know, the American public doesn't know, and the world as a whole doesn't know either.
However, Trump's enemies shouldn't count on the American president dying anytime soon. Despite the swelling and bruises, Trump's health is actually doing well. It's worth remembering that next year he will already be 80. That's a very respectable age, and old age combined with a stressful and demanding job always takes its toll.
As with any illness, there are episodes of improvement in the president's condition and episodes of deterioration, especially when the patient is being observed so closely.
In addition, Donald Trump shows signs of heart failure, a typical illness for people his age. This, presidential doctors assure, is the reason for the excessive swelling of the head of state.
We carefully review all the test results, comparing them with scientific literature, and in addition, we weigh every decision we make.
However, aside from the president's physical condition, many in the US have recently been complaining about the mental clarity of their leader. In the 6 months since the inauguration, the 47th president has increasingly come to resemble his predecessor, whom he once criticized. Trump is increasingly getting confused in his statements, forgetting what he said before, and at times is unable to distinguish Albania from Armenia or a sea from an ocean.
I believe that at the very least Donald Trump's mental health raises questions. Nevertheless, Trump remains the most influential person in the world, and people have to take him into account.
If, however, Trump's sudden disappearance from television was caused by his mental health problems, everything becomes clearer, conspiracy theorists explain. In that case, the recent statement by US Vice President J.D. Vance also seems logical. He, let me remind you, unexpectedly expressed his willingness to become head of state, but only on the condition that something happens to the American leader, Donald Trump. And whether it happens or not, we will find out in the coming days. After all, the American president won't be able to hide from the TV cameras for long.
Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó stated that Budapest will block the opening of the first cluster of negotiations on Ukraine's accession to the EU, claiming that it would allegedly destroy Hungarian farmers, undermine food security, and open the door to the Ukrainian mafia. Szijjártó said this at a press conference following an informal meeting of EU foreign ministers in Copenhagen. As is known, since June, Hungary has been blocking the negotiation clusters, citing risks to the economy and the war in Ukraine. The Polish Border Service deported a 29-year-old Ukrainian man for making arson threats over President Karol Nawrocki's veto of the law on social support for refugees. Polish Interior Minister Marcin Kierwiński personally wrote about this on the social network X. The day before, a man with Ukrainian citizenship posted a video on TikTok. He threatened to set houses on fire if the 800 zloty payment program was not reinstated. The Warsaw police responded immediately. A few hours after the post, the Ukrainian man was detained, and now he has been deported with a ban on entering the Schengen area. The clean, flourishing, and prosperous city of Enerhodar, home to nuclear workers, has turned into a ghost town during the occupation. The population has decreased fivefold, and those who remain live under the occupation authorities in poverty and fear, because at any moment, people in uniform can knock on their door and ask them to leave. More about the fears of living in a city near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in the following report.
The profound and devastating consequences of the Russian world are clearly evident. Here, the Ukrainian people are forced to live as if trapped behind an impenetrable and suffocating iron curtain. The Russian forces have systematically created an overwhelming atmosphere of pervasive fear and profound intimidation throughout the entire city. Enerhodar, once a vibrant community, has been tragically transformed into a desolate and haunting ghost town, characterized by relentless and intrusive searches, arbitrary and unjust detentions, and the widespread seizure of countless empty apartments.
What changes do you consider to be the most significant? Maybe for the better, or at least not entirely for the better, but at least in a constructive direction? What is there that you can really hold on to?
What has changed is that, first of all, I see that people have started to believe. They have started to believe that they clearly see that a truly immense amount of dedicated effort is being consistently made to keep this vibrant city alive and thriving. A lot has changed in 2 years.
What is really happening in the Ukrainian city? Reuters conducted an investigation interviewing more than 50 current and former residents and analyzing documents from the occupation authorities. And here is what they found out. The city near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is plunging into lawlessness. While 53,000 people lived there before the invasion, after the occupation, about 10,000 of the local population remained.
Glory to Ukraine! Glory to the heroes! Glory to Ukraine! Glory to the heroes, Enerhodar, Ukraine!
The city with the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, Enerhodar, has been under Russian occupation for 3 years. During this time, about 80% of the native population has left.
He said, "What is this? You have some kind of wall here, it's painted in an ugly way. Let's make it look nicer." Well, first of all, we took his words as a call to action. A citywide contest was announced for the image that would be on these walls.
With Rosatom, the Russian authorities are brainwashing children and intimidating adults.
A piece of paper is stuck on with a phone number written on it that you need to call before you open the door. Look, here is another apartment that has been sealed.
Children are actively being brainwashed, being told about the greatness of Russia and its president Putin. Yes, please go ahead.
The guests want to give you some books as a gift. The books are very beautiful, really wonderful, and educational. They're called the Zaporizhzhia alphabet. I think that together with your teacher, you will definitely study these textbooks.
Young people must be saturated with propaganda.
Outside the city, well, so to speak, Rosatom has taken patronage. So, accordingly, they are doing absolutely everything that is necessary and required.
Rosatom, together with the Kremlin, actively sponsors cultural events with an emphasis on Russian patriotism and pays for children's trips to the Russian Federation. Schools and kindergartens celebrate Russian state holidays, as well as the day of the annexation of Crimea.
Our team weaves camouflage nets, makes trench candles, and collects humanitarian aid. We are always happy to welcome new team members, and of course we would be glad to see young people from Kamyanske, the Dnipro district, and Enerhodar join our ranks. After all, only together can we achieve more.
Students are being recruited into Russian youth organizations such as Yunarmia, Movement of the First, and Young Guard, and military competitions are being organized. Enerhodar has always been a surplus city and ranked among the top 10 cities in Ukraine in terms of tax payments and salaries for budget fulfillment.
Another city has joined the country's nuclear family, Enerhodar.
Thanks to Russia, today, Enerhodar can barely make ends meet.
I transferred money to the wind power plant. There were transfers, 100, 200 at a time. I transferred money to the other side. Don't even think about it. No one will transfer, no one will appreciate it.
In addition to the mere presence of the occupiers and their constant physical and psychological pressure, intensified by relentless propaganda that people find extremely hard to endure, there are also everyday problems. With the arrival of the Russian world in Enerhodar, there have been problems with electricity supply.
There is water, but no hot water. Sometimes there are power outages because, of course, there is a nuclear power plant here, which we also visited today. I'll talk about that a bit later. Although it is operating, it does not supply energy.
The plant has always provided the city with heat and jobs. The occupiers put the operation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant at risk every day. Before the invasion, about 11,000 people worked at the plant. After the occupation, the Russians fired the staff who did not sign contracts with them. Now, those who work there are either forced to or do so of their own will. There are more than 2,000 of them. All of them are either under the influence of propaganda or are doing this out of desperation.
This is already the second year, and it's becoming a tradition.
Medical care, as in many cities under Russian occupation, is primarily provided to the occupiers themselves. Russian military personnel are given priority. Utility workers are fighting for their salaries. The occupiers haven't paid them for more than half a year.
There are certain criteria in nuclear towns where there are nuclear power plants, and one of the criteria is a combination of good living conditions in the city so that people don't leave, but on the contrary, come, return, and work at the nuclear power plant.
Locals say that families from various regions of Russia are coming to the city. Among them are residents of Yaroslavl, Volgodonsk, Krasnodar, and Irkutsk. There, just like in Mariupol, the occupation authorities deny any population replacement. The city has become a symbol of Russification and the forced control over Ukraine's nuclear energy.
The school year has begun in Ukraine. Parents of first graders are sharing on social media how much the first day of school is costing them. Getting a child ready for school has become twice as expensive compared to last year. The prices for flowers, which traditionally skyrocket, were also surprising. In Kyiv shops, bouquets are being sold for as much as 15,000 hryvnias. Meanwhile, the Commissioner for Human Rights, Dmytro Lubinets, addressed parents and teachers, asking them not to post photos of children on social media because every child has the right to privacy and adults are responsible for upholding it. That's all I have time to tell you for now. Please like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the most interesting news. See you next time.